Sandripper, my first commercial game. Priced at about $8 Canadian, it sold 600 copies in 6 months. All the reviews are positive, but it doesn't have very many. I'm going to talk as best as I can about how and why I believe the game failed to capture an audience. First, I'll go over broadly what I think hurt the game the most, then I'll cover some of the more nitpicky stuff. The game's total lack of music and middling art direction made the game not as appealing as it could have been. Music, of course, should have at least been there in some small form, like the main menu feels really weird without any sound. But I never got around to getting music because for a while I didn't want to work with anyone else on the game, and by the time I did get over that, it was kinda too late. I was neck deep in the final stretch of development and didn't want to shift focus. The lack of a soundtrack is the most mentioned aspect of the game by far, and easily my biggest regret. Get a musician on board your project ASAP. Unlike the lack of music, people don't usually comment on how the game looks, and if people aren't commenting on the look of your game, something's wrong. This is supported by the fact that Sandripper posts have never really done very well on social media. It just isn't eye-catching enough to draw people in. The game only has one environment due to time constraints, but I could have definitely been smarter about it, making this one desert feel like 4 or 5 just by having things like fog, a couple different times of day, and changing out the color palette each level. Procedurally generated areas would have been great too to further diversify how the game looks, but that's kind of a whole different beast. Visual clarity is also very important to hook people, because when a game is squeezed down into a small video on social media, a lot of information is lost. And in the case of Sandripper, even the player character itself. At a glance, you can't even tell the game is about dual-wielding weapons, or that you're a rocket tank. Not really. Stronger shapes and bolder colors would have definitely helped here, I think. And finally, the broad overall look of Sandripper is a really tough thing to nail down. Like, what kind of vibe is it supposed to give off? Is it supposed to be joyful, melancholic? What does a rocket tank power fantasy feel like and look like? Is it round or sharp, bright and contrasty, dark and flat? Hard stuff to answer, personally. I think that's why the game defaulted to a neutral, somewhat uninteresting look. I just couldn't decide what I was going for. Next time, I would definitely put more time into experimenting with the look of the game. Visual fidelity may not be important, but a communicative style absolutely is. If your game isn't compelling enough at a glance, then it's really hard to market it. Something else in this vein worth mentioning is the number of times people have called it a Survivors-like. I personally don't think the target audience for Sandripper actually overlaps with the Survivor-like audience at all, which no doubt hurt the game's reach. This misinterpretation is probably due to the genre being synonymous with wave defense right now, because of the frankly obscene amount of Vampire Survivors clones. I'm mostly chalking this one up to me not realizing how prolific the genre was when Sandripper released. This was kind of a tough one to work around. So, if the game managed to hook you despite what I've just said, you have to also get over the hurdle of the controls. For movement, the game has standard twin-stick controls, as long as you're not boosting. We'll get there. WASD moves you, and the mouse aims you. Simple. But, while you're boosting, you only move towards your aim direction, your mouse. This is a little incongruent. Most people expect boosting to be like a dash that just shoves you in whatever direction you were moving. And some are a little disappointed when it doesn't work out the way they expect. This style of movement isn't inherently bad though. When you get used to it, the game plays somewhat like an FPS game, where your aim direction can often be the same as your movement direction. This creates fun moments where you have to run or dodge instead of sitting and fighting. But outside of the combat, boosting isn't encouraged enough to justify working the way it does. This is of course because, at its core, the game is a twin-stick shooter. I can't make the movement too complex or it becomes harder to shoot. Likewise, if the shooting is complex and the movement is complex, the minimum amount of skill required to enjoy the game goes up exponentially. And, well, I kinda made the shooting also complex. Dual wielding is the name of the game. Left and right click, fire your left and right weapons, respectively. I even let you keep every weapon you find so you can freely equip whatever combo you want right at the start of a run. However, that's not all. Every single weapon is also designed to have a bit of a skill curve to it, inspired mainly by Deep Rock Galactic. So, some weapons fire once when tapping and can be charged up to do something else. Some weapons are semi-auto, some are full auto. This one shoots faster when you boost, and this one gets more wild the longer you fire. This weapon breaks shields, this weapon applies radiation. You can probably see where I'm going with this. There's a very good reason why Deep Rock Galactic's multi-function weapons are only held one at a time, and that's even with the simple FPS movement. Imagine trying to blast around at Mach 2, one finger on the boost, another tap firing a shotgun, another held down for a full auto cannon, and another steering the tank around rocks, all while being bombed, chased, and fired at. What, you think that sounds fun? Well, you should buy Sandripper then. But if this sounds like too much, you would definitely be in the majority. When you combine the funky movement with complex weapon controls, the result is Sandripper, a game with a high skill floor and an even higher skill ceiling. And for some, it just clicks with them and they have tons of fun, but for most, it's a bit too much. This likely explains why all the reviews are positive. People who bounced off the game did so too quickly to bother reviewing. So, the lesson here is to balance your most used mechanics between one complex one and one simple one, like simple movement with crazy weapons. Or another method is to have everything be complex, but reduce the amount of button presses per second. For example, I think if the hover tank was slow and weighty with simpler controls, the game would be more approachable with even the potential for a higher skill ceiling. Decisions per minute is something that should increase as someone plays your game. That's fun, after all, but I should have eased into the complexity a lot slower than I did. Either way, try and make your controls simple. Alright, those were the main 2 points I wanted to go into detail about, so I'm just going to talk about the little things that I wish I did differently, starting with the maps. There are 3 maps in the game. I wish there were at least a couple more, of course, and I especially wish I added more interactivity to them, like hazards you'd have to be aware of and could maybe use against enemies. Things that would encourage doing little boosting tricks or something, I don't know. Boosting until your engine was red hot and then ejecting its nuclear contents onto enemies was supposed to be a much bigger part of the game than it ended up being. As development went on, the reason for this mechanic's existence kept getting called into question. First, the movement tightened up, and you didn't need to boost as much. Then, overheating was removed because it wasn't fun. Weapons eventually became strong enough on their own. And finally, when I added weapon upgrades, it firmly pushed the core dumps out of being useful. There's definitely some alternate reality where engine heat and core dumping are what Sandripper is entirely built around instead of dual wielding. But that reality isn't this one. The performance was also not super great. It was something I kept working toward and improving the entire time I was working on the game. But I only managed to make it just playable on low-end PCs. Even then, it still doesn't work on the Steam Deck. Since releasing the game, I've been doing a lot of little tests in a fresh project to get better at making a truly optimized game. Those tests have been going super well, but I won't show them quite yet. It's a secret. The game's 3-day-long challenge seed was a troubled game mode right from the beginning. I wanted to make something that would be uniquely fun and challenging for experienced players. After a lot of iteration, it ended up being a mode where you start with 2 predetermined weapons and fight through 15 waves, which got harder faster than Endless mode. Turns out though, Experienced players just want to play endless mode, so that one was a wash. I don't really know what to do differently about that. Sand Ripper was absolutely filled to the brim with problems I never had to figure out before, like designing boss fights, online leaderboards, making aim assists, a whole lot more. All in all, it was a good experience, and I am glad I did it. My next project will be built using all the knowledge I've gained from this one, and hopefully my subsequent games keep getting better and better. And that's about all. Thanks for watching.